Good afternoon. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral here in San Francisco, California. Welcome to the Forum Spring Season. Crystal Williams is a writer, poet, advocate, leader, and president of the Rhode Island School of Design since 2022. She believes that education, art and design, and commitments to equity and justice are essential for transforming our society. For more than 2 decades, her work to elevate and amplify multiple perspectives in higher education has galvanized our imagination concerning who we have been and who we can become. In her inaugural address, she asked, "Can you imagine a single national or international movement in which the arts were not a motivating and defining force?" Artists' work galvanized the imagination, influenced perception, helped to drive strategies, and helped to drive change. This is not superficial work, it's serious work. Today, we're going to be talking about the serious power of art in a changing world. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Malcolm, I'm thrilled to be here. It's taken us some bit, but
It has, but that just makes it even all the more precious.
It's fantastic. Thank you. I'm eager to
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah, sure thing. We're so glad to see you. I wish we could be in the same town, but it's going to be a long time before I'm back in Rhode Island, I'm afraid.
And unfortunately, I haven't been out to California in a little bit. Probably in the next couple of months, I hope.
Yeah, well,
I love your
to see you.
cathedral. It's a beautiful place. I was there for Litquake some years ago.
Oh, I love those occasions. They're so fun.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how someone becomes the president of Rhode Island School of Design. And to give you a little chance to think about that a little bit more, I wanted to start with your childhood. You're the daughter of a musician and an educator, and you grew up in Detroit and in Madrid. Like, how did your parents influence you? And what was it like growing up in those two really different places?
So I emerged from an unusual love story, which is a fundamental point of influence in my life. My father was born in 1907 in Bessemer, Alabama, a black man. Worked at Ford's Foundry, so was a union member, but played the piano at night, had a quartet, which is where he met my mother. So my father's African American, my mother's white, from Detroit. And we think my dad may have had high school, we're not sure. My mother had a graduate degree, and they took me in as an infant just out of the hospital as a foster child, and then they had to fight to keep me because they were a very unusual couple. He was 30 years her senior. He was African American, she's white. It was in the 70s. And I was a foster kid, and so at that point in the 70s, they really weren't allowing foster families to adopt children, and my parents just thought that I was their kid. And so I grew up in a house full of love and joy and music and creativity, with parents who not only believed in the power of creativity, but actually lived the art in really active ways. And the influence of love, just a sort of bald, raw, deep adoration and love really informed who I am as a person. There are other influences. Both of my parents were relatively religious. My father Episcopalian, my mom Catholic, out of a social justice Catholic background. And so we didn't talk much about service, we just served. So I learned that being of help to other people was the norm, that offering where you can was the thing that we do. And even just yesterday, I said to somebody, somebody said, "Oh, you're so nice." I said, "I try every day to make my parents proud. Every day. Yeah. It is sort of front and center." So I don't know. It's a long answer. You asked about Detroit and Spain, I think. Yeah. My mom was probably one of the most curious people I've ever met. She was curious about other people, both in this country and elsewhere. So we had a van when I was a kid, and she wanted to go to the contiguous states, and we did that in the summer because she was an educator, public school educator. So she had summers off, so we would travel around the country in our little van. And then we did that, and so then we wound up going to Mexico because she was convinced that Spanish was the language of the future.
Yeah, she was
And
right.
she was right. She also didn't allow me to watch TV. She didn't allow me to drink soda pop. And we went to the library every week.
Well, I love that.
So, it was, so we wound up in Spain, largely because she wanted me to have Spanish and she was curious.
Yeah.
So growing up in Detroit in the 70s and 80s as a Black child was incredible because everyone around me that I could see as role models, the mayor, many people in the city council, people. So my relationship to power has always been one in which I have felt that the world was open to me. And the first time, Malcolm, that I recognized that there was something in the world that I had not consciously thought was available to me was the election of Barack Obama. It was the first time I remember him being elected and just sobbing. And I thought, why are you sobbing? And I realized this was the one thing in the world of things that I thought I could not ever imagine being or doing as a Black person.
Right.
But that is the result of having grown up in Detroit.
Yeah, and just having parents too who made sure that you were in settings that helped nurture you and build you up. And I can just imagine there at that library with their stack of books, your mom on the way out the door.
Libraries, museums. I mean, you want to take jazz dance class? Great. You want to take crochet? Great. You want to ice skate? Do that. It was a. I guess I will use this language. It was a blessed childhood.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just your experience of art as a child too. Just what things spoke to you, and what memories do you have of art and the artistic endeavor?
So I don't know if you've ever been out in public and you run across a little kid who is so dramatic, like singing and dancing and jumping around. So that was me. And so, we went to plays. I have photos of me and Mom in matching gowns going to theater.
Oh, yeah.
My father was, as I said, a jazz pianist. So they would go to gigs at night and take me, and I would sleep on the club, in the banquette. They'd put me to sleep, and they would be hanging out, at his gigs and so forth. So we spent a lot of time in museums, especially as we traveled around the world. So I think my appreciation of visual arts, certainly performing arts, since I was very, very little, but visual arts I think came from both visiting grand architectural spaces and just having a sense of the magnitude that space can create within oneself and how people move in space, but also just access to the history of art through the museums all over the world that we traveled. So in some ways it was a relatively informal but robust
Art education.
Art education. Yeah, that's exactly right.
We have our former dean was a great actor, and when I've known him for years and years, like 30 years, and he used to say, Malcolm, remember what your part is in the play. And I always think about that. I think, am I wearing the right costume for my part in the play? But I was wondering what you learned as an actor, and what kind of carried forward from that part of your life to now.
So I think of theater, which really is my first love, as one of the most democratic art forms, right? Because you've got the writers, directors, actors, costume designers. I mean, there's a whole infrastructure of people who are engaging, playing their part to make the thing go, and that includes the audience. So from theater, I extracted a sense of the power of the collective in service of a single thing. So that's one lesson I took from theater. The other is I had a a mentor teacher in high school named Marilyn McCormick, who I think won a Tony for arts education. She's just an extraordinary teacher, and she was very rigorous. And I remember walking onto the stage in a play. We were rehearsing, and she said, "Chris, stop. Go off of the stage, change your face, and come back."
I love that. That's great.
Change your face, right?
Face.
And I just use that as an example of the many lessons I learned to do with the idea that the thing that you are creating is not you as an artist, whether it's an actor or the material that you're. It's not you. It is a production. It's a product, right? And so I learned not to take things personally, right? As an artist.
Yeah.
The body in that moment was a vessel, and I wasn't employing the vessel in the best way to her, right, sort of specifications. And that has been a really essential lesson. It's been a lesson I've pulled with me through theater into writing, which is to say, especially when I was a young poet, the work that is on the page is what I am capable of doing at this moment, in this time, with the skills that I have right now. And that is all it is. And in 10 years, that poem would have been very different. But right now, this is what I have to work with. And that's okay. And it's not an indictment of myself. It is simply a reflection of what I am capable of doing in the moment. And there's a kind of freedom in that.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And when I'm preaching a sermon, I get to a point where I'm like, oh, I wish it's 11:30 at night on Saturday. I think I just wish I had a better sermon. And a little voice inside me just says, hey, that's what you were given. That's what you're given, and you're going to make the most of it, because it's not just what's on the page, the notes that are what matters. It's like how you're able to convey this. And and my wife is a professor at law school, and for her, the ability to be coached, like the students who did athletics, sports in college, there's something special about them, because other students just get so defensive when people try to criticize or talk about their writing. It's almost like they can't be helped. And you're right. I can imagine as a poet, you're probably getting criticism all the time, and being able to assimilate that and make good judgments about how to change what you're doing is a really important part of it.
It's important, and I would also say in time, this sort of position has helped me determine what critiques I'm going to take and which I'm not going to.
Right, exactly.
And where the ego is in that.
Yes.
Right. So sometimes a critique will come in, and it actually is exactly the right thing. You sort of know, like, I don't want to do this thing. I don't.
Yeah, right.
Like, I really am married to the thing that I was doing, but that critique puts its finger right on a problem that I was intuiting, but just didn't have and sometimes you say, I actually don't know how that critique is right. I don't know how to address it. Like, I actually don't know. So there's that. But sometimes a critique comes in and you think, yeah, no. Like, either that's coming from a unhelpful place or an ego place, or it's somebody who just fundamentally doesn't understand or disagrees or whatever it is. And you have the confidence to decide. Right. And again, not be burdened by a sense of woundedness.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly for me. On Easter Sunday, I preached at 8:30, and someone came up and gave me some really great suggestions, and I made huge changes between 8:30 and 11, because they were right. I mean, it was just like too much of I just didn't need to rehash everything that was going on in the newspapers for the first quarter of the sermon. I could just, people knew what was happening in the newspapers. They didn't need me to repeat it.
They were looking for something different from you.
Exactly.
Interesting. So do you get a lot of that, Malcolm?
I do, because I mean, that's the greatest thing saying about being a preacher versus being a, I mean, you must experience this as a poet. Like you see how people are receiving what it is that you have to offer. And so you're getting live feedback. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of energy around this, or, oh, people are pretty checked out about this, or, you know, and even to the point where, you know, I may have a 3-point sermon and people are just not with me after the end of the second point. I'm just cut the third point on the fly. You know, it doesn't happen that much, but I'm always, it's like a dance, you know?
So that reminds me, when I was a much younger person, I lived in New York and was sort of engaged in spoken word poetry. I think really the sort of first iteration of what spoken word used to be, not what it is now.
Yeah.
And did a lot of performing at the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. Well, so you go on a Friday night. The New Eurekan is a small, very jam-packed New York crowd. You're on the stage. The audience is literally not 3 feet from you, right? And you're sort of reciting a poem, and if you don't catch their attention immediately, they'll just look at you, and then they'll turn to their person and just start talking, and you've lost them.
That's right.
So,
That's right. You can't get them back.
So your story about feedback from sermons sort of reminds me of that. And I guess for us, maybe the analogy would be, maybe this is sort of like what some young people experience with Instagram, right? With the likes.
Yeah.
Maybe this is how they experience that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. There is, I mean, we have broadcast all our sermons, and there is a way in which just objectively some sermons just take off in a way that others don't. And it sounds sad to think that you'd evaluate the quality of the sermon based on some objective algorithm from somewhere. But it helps keep you honest about like what's working and what's not working.
I think it depends, though, and maybe here's the difference. Like, what is the goal of your work?
Yeah.
Right? So in your case, your goal, I would imagine, and maybe this is wrong, is to connect immediately with the people whom have entered into this sort of subtle contract with you, this sort of exchange, right?
Yeah.
And that is a goal. I have many poet friends, and I think our goals differ. You know?
Yeah, definitely. It's a different genre too. And even just like you said about the spoken word poetry, I mean, there's a way in which you have a much more confidence about what it is that you're actually saying when you go. And I can imagine you could say, well, I'm going to do this poem instead of that poem, and you might change that on the fly. But I can't imagine you changing, like I said, like my example of just like cutting a third of the poem out. Because of how people were receiving it,
Well, I think there are poets who are able to do it. I'm not quick enough to change things on the fly. I have done in the past, but probably not as consciously as just I've forgotten lines, for instance.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you arrived at Rhode Island School of Design. What surprised you the most once you actually got going there as president? Because people will tell you all sorts of things when you're in the search process, and then you're actually there. Like, what did you notice? What kind of caught your attention?
So the school's name is interesting to me. I've been aware of RISD for many years. I'm not a visual artist, although I am deeply committed to design largely. What surprised me was the breadth of work that happens at RISD. So I knew that there were all these departments. I didn't know that there are students who, for instance, are in the textile department who are working to embed sound technology into their textiles that you can wear.
Wow, that's amazing.
I wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that there's like an 85-year-old nature lab that has all manner of specimen that students can go and take out the skeleton of a beetle.
Wow.
I didn't know that alums are building wheelchairs for folks in the Southern Hemisphere who actually don't have even pavement, so that the wheelchair has shocks to balance out and to ease the impact on the body. I didn't know that. I didn't know that that there's so much music, on the campus. So that's what I mean when I say the breadth, right? I knew that there was an amalgamation of brilliance in this one place, and I knew that that the school, in many ways, is one of the places that defines culture through its alums. That is to say, if you look at a list of major American painters, for instance, what you will see is a disproportionate number compared to our size of RISD alums.
Yeah.
Right? I just didn't know the subordinate nuances that make the place unbelievable. It is an unbelievable place.
Tell me about one of your faculty members that like just somebody random or somebody that has caught your attention.
Now, I'm not going to answer that because you're going to get me in trouble, sir.
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's like asking me which is my favorite congregant.
You betcha.
They're all
I
my
love
favorite
all of my
congregants.
faculty members equally.
Yeah, and it's funny too because that's exactly right, and I love them for their different quirkiness too. So some of the people I know that there are congregants out there who have no idea, but I just absolutely love them.
That's exactly right. What I will say, I mean, you're asking me about the faculty. I've been at five institutions. I started out at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, which is itself
I love that. It's like got its totally unique DNA, and it's not like any other college.
It is. That is exactly right. It is dissimilar from any other place. It is wholly itself, deeply intellectual, and the project, that community of intellectuals is sort of focused and committed to the project of intellectualism, which is a kind of gorgeousness. And RISD, in the same way, is full of people who are committed to the creative endeavor. And so what I would say about the faculty, not any single person, I have been struck by the faculty's commitment to the amplification of the talent in these young people.
Oh yeah.
They are so committed to these young folks that it is a thing of great beauty. It's a thing of great beauty. I think I also think that is true of teachers who are really committed to, in public schools or wherever, like where an individual is committed to the amplification of others. To me, that is a moment to revere.
Yeah,
And so,
I think too, like most universities having this spectrum of different kinds of like engineers and natural scientists, when you have that many people who are so creative and so engaged in the arts, how does that change the spirit of the place? So, how do things feel different than say at Reed College or at New York University or at UCLA?
Interestingly, I think that Reed and RISD are analogous in the way in which the faculty are dedicated to student development. These two places, and they're both, they're both niche schools. They have carved out a very particular kind of thing. The way that RISD differs from like a BU, for instance, or any other kind of school that I've been at or have had the privilege of engaging with seriousness. When you are mentoring, teaching someone who is engaged in creative practice, and specifically in practice that is attempting to unearth something that comes from oneself, one's core. there is a kind of, and here I'm using this word in its most innocent form, there is a kind of intimacy that happens that differs from the kind of mentorship relationship that happens if you're trying to help a student write a good paper in, insert whatever discipline you want.
Yeah.
And that's not to diminish the importance of that kind of mentorship, but there is something that is really personal. So when I was teaching poetry, for instance, I'm teaching young people how to bring forward a very private inner voice. And you have to treat that moment of creation and iteration with simultaneously with rigor and with love.
Yeah.
You have to. One of my friends, he's actually a magnificent human and probably one of the smartest people I know. He's a magnificent poet. His name is A. Van Jordan. Van said to me one day, I approach every poem with love in my heart.
That's great. That's so
right?
great.
And we were talking about teaching.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it struck me as something for the ages.
Yeah.
And something that is deeply important to remember for those of us who are teaching young creatives, that we have to approach the thing that they are trying to do with love in their heart. In part, I think for young creatives, I think in this culture, in this country, Malcolm, to say that one aspires to be an artist or a designer is itself an act of courage.
Yes.
For which the rest of us should be monumentally thankful.
Yeah.
The culture here in this country, the broader culture, is not one, actually, that I think sufficiently values artists. I don't think we do. I was privileged to represent the United States at an international poetry conference in Nicaragua. And so there were poets from all over the world. And one of the days that we were there, we were taken to different pueblos and municipalities around. We were broken into groups. And one of the groups went to a town, and the mayor came out. They brought all of the children out into the center. I mean, this big, and the mayor said to the children, do you see these people? These are poets. This is the most important job you can ever have.
Oh, wow. That's lovely.
Can you imagine any place in this country, a mayor coming out and saying,
the mayor of Long Beach or Sacramento
or Detroit or wherever. I mean, I can't imagine any mayor saying that to children. And I'm only using that as an example of the ways in which the arts are privileged and valued in other places, in other countries, that I think don't happen or doesn't happen in this country in the same way. So my original point was just that these young people, I think, are so courageous to, against the odds, say.
Find out what's within them. Like you said, I mean, that in order to do it, you have to give love and encouragement and, So, the New Yorker had an article recently about, I wrote the title of the article is, Will the Humanities Survive AI? So I just was curious. I mean, we're all talking about it here in San Francisco. What does it mean for poets and visual artists and musicians and architects and university professors and the humanities and for government? What do you see happening with AI there in Rhode Island?
So we had last year a symposium on AI. We've been employing AI as a tool at RISD for some time, and in these very interesting ways. We're just next year launching the first new major that we in 30 years.
Wow.
And it's called Computation, Technology, and Culture. And our approach is distinct in that we start with the artists and designers. And the question is, what are you trying to do? What do you want to do? And then the second question is, how does AI and technology help you do that?
Yeah.
Which is different from what many sort of computation programs, their position, their stance, which is, this is what the technology is, and we're going to bring the artists and designers to the technology. Ours is inverted. You asked a specific question about AI. Yeah, I've been reading a great deal about it. And just the other day, I used AI to help create some executive summaries, and I was flabbergasted. I mean, it was astonishing how fast, you
Oh, I know. I just
input
can't get
the
over it.
thing,
Yeah.
you say,
Yes.
upload the thing, and then please create an executive summary. And then you say, no, please add more data. And then so that was amazing, because what I accomplished in an hour would have taken 2 days to do.
Right.
What I will say in relation to the arts, which I think was your question, we're still learning. And when I listen to the experts, every one of them who seems intelligent says, we don't yet know
Yeah.
what this thing is going to be fully capable of. What I will say is, I think that artists and designers who I know who are using AI as a tool, right, to accomplish tasks that actually free up creative time and space. But the act of art making, for me, is fundamentally an act of discovery. And the act of discovery is one that requires, I think, a human to synthesize and contextualize a great deal of information that is quite subtle. And so, can AI create a palindrome? Sure. Can it create, a sestina? Sure.
Yeah.
Is it going to create a poem that gets to the heart of some very complicated human emotion and history, and be able to subtly reflect that and suggest a relationship between this history and this history and this emotion?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think that people are required in that equation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the whole idea of having an AI generated sermon. I mean, obviously the AI generated sermons right now are terrible. But so for me, it's not like that so much. It's more like, I remember Karl Barth making an argument in Church Dogmatics, but I don't remember where the argument is. It's an argument that is about 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 through 10. Then AI has been helpful for me finding those sources that already exist. And then also, it just means that when AI is wrong, it's not as devastating. I turn to the page, and that's clearly not the right page. So it's not a destructive mistake. But that's where it's helpful for me now. And maybe someday it'd be helpful in a different way. But the idea is, one thing to have like a machine synthesize a lot of material, or to find things that would be hard to find, but it's another whole thing to think about machines that actually can think. Or it's hard for me to imagine that ever being the case.
I think that's right. The co-chair of my board, David Lee, is a really brilliant guy, and he talks about creativity being the last luxury. And I do think that the thing that is made with the hand,
Yeah.
the thing that is made with the heart, in time, those are the things that I think humans are going to value. So some years ago, I heard a statistic, which I can't recount for you now, but it was interesting. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, there was a proliferation of record stores and sort of single discipline bookstores that were coming back into the fore. And the hypothesis was that these things were coming back into vogue because this generation has grown up in this sort of collective online environment, and they long for an individual, unique experience, which an LP can do.
Yeah.
And an MP3 cannot, right? The LP has it's a little scratchy, and right? And there's just a kind of authenticity. I think people are always going to, I think it's endemic to our species. And if you look at the history of art, you see this. We long for authenticity and for meaning and for the reflection of meaning of self and meaning of community through history and time. So, I'm not particularly concerned about AI taking the place of painters or taking the place of, insert all kinds of disciplinary. I'm not that concerned at this point about AI making discoveries. I suspect, so I talked a little earlier about a student who is weaving sound technology into their textile.
Right.
I think where AI will be very helpful is in the manufacturing of that and in the deepening of the development of that. It's not clear to me that AI would have discovered that.
Right.
As
Right.
an
I was
intervention.
having the exact same thought today. I was, coming on my way here to the office, and I was just thinking, like Paul Tillich's systematic theology. Like, I can't imagine a machine making that. Something that's like that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm totally open to whatever might happen. But human beings, the more sophisticated we get about understanding what human beings are, the more we realize that we're bodies. Like, there's no such thing as a human that doesn't have a body with it, that doesn't have its emotions and its own personal history and its own agency. And those are things that's just hard to imagine machines having.
I sometimes I agree with that, Malcolm, and I do worry, if I'm being totally honest, that that you and I, people who think like us, are sort of missing something.
Yeah, yeah. I think about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
All my philosophy classes have made me dumb in terms of understanding artificial intelligence.
exactly. And then I go to the experts, and what I hear from them doesn't actually suggest that they know either.
Yeah.
So, on some level, it's a kind of wait and see. Do I think that AI for creatives is going to level out some entry level positions? Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. Do I think that AI will take the jobs of creative directors, of sculptors, of painters, of gallerists, of illustrators, of insert all of the makers?
Yeah.
No, I don't actually.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So Harvard Magazine, I just was reading an article in it yesterday about the conflict between the current presidential administration and the university. And I wanted to ask you were you surprised by, this antagonism from the federal government towards our universities? And then, how do you see this playing out, and what does it mean particularly at RISD?
I don't know that I would describe my reaction as surprised by the antagonism. I think I've been surprised by the rapidity of the actions.
Yeah.
We're just in the first 3 months, really, or 4 months of an administration, and the scale and the speed at which this administration is moving. I don't. Now it's, it could be that I wasn't paying that much attention, but I don't remember in my lifetime another administration moving this quickly or this deeply across the infrastructure of the government. So that has been surprising. For better or worse, RISD is not. We're not a science school. We engage lots of technology and innovation. So there's a lot of innovation on my campus that probably would be surprising to people, but we're not largely funded by these sort of big science grants. So in this way, we're a bit inoculated from that sort of tranche of work that the administration seems to be focused on. My concerns with regard to what is happening, I'm very concerned about the sector. I am a person who has dedicated my professional career to the value of education.
Yeah.
And so I am very worried about the people in this country and in others who will not have the opportunity to be educated because some of these cuts to research funding and so forth, and cuts that may actually be coming down the line through this reconciliation process that's is going to mean the closure of many schools, and that is going to mean that access to quality education is just going to be much more limited. And so, there are questions that I ask. Will we become a nation in which the very wealthy have access to excellent education, and some people who don't come from large financial means, who are lucky enough to get into a school that has enough money to provide them with a financial aid package that makes getting that education a viable proposition? Is that the nation that we're going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're so right to ask. I was talking to a college president probably about 2 months ago. So it was really before things really heated up with university things.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like really frank about it. He said, if the federal government takes us on, that lawsuit will go under as a university. We will cease to exist. And so there is a lot of fear. And I think that it has, one of the focal points is diversity and equity and inclusion. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about like what this means for that landscape. I mean, the work that you did at Reed was such important work in that area. And I think of you as just like, one of the greatest treasures in America in terms of helping move us forward in diversity, equity, inclusion. Like, so what does it mean when the federal government is making these threats, and how will that, affect the university environment?
Well, there's certainly been a chilling effect. There's no doubt about it, which I think is part of the strategy, right? The other part of the strategy is to shut all of it down.
Yeah.
And, of course, the irony in that is that when done well, diversity, equity, and inclusion work at its core is about ensuring that all of us, so not just the Black people, not just the women, not just the LGBTQ folks, not just the, insert all of the protected class, but all of us feel as if we can thrive in these spaces. That is at the core what the work is. And, one of the critiques that I think is probably fair on some level is that some people who have conservative views have not felt that they can thrive, right, in certain spaces. And but because that is not a reason to do away with this notion that everyone should thrive.
Yeah.
Right, so there's that. What I have seen, my colleagues are sort of span the spectrum of how they are engaging with this question about DEI. I certainly think that there are many institutions that took on the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they did it because it was the thing to do. Their communities wanted it, but they weren't really that committed to it.
Yeah.
And so, for some institutions, this is, great. We'll push back. Other institutions on the other side of it are fully committed and have embedded this work. You can rename a thing, but still think that everybody here should be able to thrive. And so I'm worried that the folks who have sort of pushed back, I worry for their campuses. I worry for the first generation to college students. I worry.
And just
I worry.
those students who come and they arrive at college far away from home and are isolated and don't get the support that they need to. I feel like there's these moments in a young person's life where you just, if they have support in that moment, it can get them through and get them to do amazing things. Amazing things. Like, yeah.
Amazing things. When I was, I'll tell you a story, Malcolm, if I can. When I was at Reed, I was a bit of a stickler about, not letting people into my class after a certain date. Now, all this kind of stuff. Timely. I'm a timeliness person.
I'm the same way.
And so there was a young woman. I tell the story, and I've asked her in the past if it's okay for me to tell the story, although I will not share her name. White, from a rural town in Oregon, first in her family to go to college. Few, if any, financial resources. So she got to this school, this sort of intellectual jewel, and it's 2 weeks into classes, and she comes into my office hours, and she's got, black sort of punky eyeliner everywhere, and she's sobbing. She's sobbing.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I've made the worst decision of my life coming here. I don't belong here. This is not a place for me. My roommate is in your poetry class, and she thinks that maybe your class might be a place for me. Can I please, just until, because I've got to be here for this semester, but so just until I can get out of here, can I be in your class?
Wow. That's amazing.
And so I said, I will make an exception, but these are the rules. You got to show up and blah, blah, blah. So she comes. Fast forward 4 years later, she has graduated, had spent either a semester or a year in Germany, fluent.
Wow.
In not only that language, but others.
Yeah.
Right? Had thrived, and now is a teacher.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
Is a teacher.
That's wonderful.
Graduated from Reed College in Portland, Oregon. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant child.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Now influencing all these whole new generation of students.
That is the power. That is what diversity, equity, and inclusion should do. That is the result. It is that a person comes into a space and with all of the history that they bring and are honored and served uniquely for all of the histories that they bring and are able to thrive. It's super simple.
Yeah, and that's one perspective from the individual's perspective. Then, my wife at USF Law School, her students, this is the first time you've had labor leaders in the Central Valley working with agricultural workers who actually grew up in that community. And you have, African-American people from New York City on the school board who instead of having somebody from outside the community, like being the leader, you have like leaders who grew up and understand that setting and who have that legal training. So you're so right. I mean, it's necessary for the transformation of individuals and transformation of education and giving people a chance. And then there's a new insight that you'll have when women entered the legal field. The field changed, and that's what's happening too. That I see around me. We have our tradition is we take questions. And
Okay.
Questions from our audience. The first question is, I love this. What is the purpose of design, and why is it important?
So it's a great question.
It is. One of the other questions someone asked is like, what is art?
Colleagues of mine also sort of use this as a way of thinking about, so I don't know if I'm going to answer the purpose of design.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, you are probably, maybe you're out in the sun on a park bench, but okay, we can play with that too.
Yeah.
But Malcolm, we're going to look at you.
Right.
You are in a building.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
That was built so you walk up to the Grace Cathedral, there's landscape architecture that's happened outside.
Right.
You've got stone masonry happening, and then you've got the architects actually built the building to make us feel a certain way.
Right.
Then you've got the people in the building, and the people, let's hope, are clothed. So that's the textile designers, the apparel designers. Most of us I've got these frames. These are the industrial designers, right?
Oh, right.
I've got a watch on. I've got a ring on. These are jewelry folks.
Yeah.
The watch, that's also designed. Most of us have a gadget, and if we're in the Grace Cathedral, let's hope that we've turned it to silent. But right, that is also, there is user design there, right? There are texts. So the text, that is graphic design.
Yes, yeah.
So the function of design.
The chairs that we're sitting in, everything's designed for like imagining me ahead of time, knowing just how much cushioning to put in, what height should the table be, how much ornamentation, like edges of the table beautifully ornamented.
That's exactly right. So the way I think about art and design is the artists and designers enable the human project, illuminate the human project, and inspire the human project. And they do that at different levels, but that's what artists and designers do. So that if we didn't have design and art, all of us would be literally naked in a field that is no landscape design there, so because that's also a kind of design. So just in a field full of, I don't know, weeds and whatever else is out there in the nature, right? And that's sort of how we would be without design.
Yeah.
And design should not be conflated with culture and society in the way that we often think about it. I mean, I was talking about the iPhones and so forth. Cultures across time have engaged design. And again, it is about enabling the human project, enabling the ways in which we live and can live, inspiring that in different ways. That is the power of art and design. And it is why I feel so strongly about Rhode Island School of Design, about all of the art and design schools, frankly, but especially Rhode Island School of Design.
Yeah.
I don't know if that question.
No, it's funny. Karl Marx had this idea that we build human consciousness into the world. So those objects are human-shaped objects to make us more comfortable and sometimes to make us more uncomfortable.
That's exactly right.
Design that's purpose is to dehumanize. And I mean, I think of the prisons that were built in El Salvador.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, prisons generally.
Here, yeah, and
Right?
exactly across the bay at San Quentin.
That's right. And then, I'm a car person. There are cars
Yeah.
that are poorly designed.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So.
Yeah.
I hope that that answers whoever asked the question. Thank you for it, and I hope that there's some bit of an answer there that
Yeah, I love that
seems
answer.
right to you.
Every time I'm walking around for the rest of the day, when I'm walking around the campus, I'm thinking, yeah, even the height of the stairs was chosen. There's a reason for that.
There's a reason for
All out,
that.
you can see the art too. We have Suki Bryan's earth window, this huge earth window, and then these clouds that go all the way down the main steps of Grace Cathedral. They're so beautiful. We'll send you an email with a photograph of it.
Thank you.
Here's the next question that we got from the audience. Could you say more about how art drives social change?
Yeah. So I like to think about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
If you just think a bit about the images from that movement that really were pivotal in both narrating what was going on and changing what was going on, those were the filmmakers and photographers, right? And then you had, so let's just think. So King is on a podium. And the thing about King and the civil rights folks that people often don't talk about is how deeply strategic they were. So if you were to look at one of the programs from that moment in our history, what you would see is speech. You'd see a kind of narrative arc that galvanizes excitement and hope, which is a powerful motivating factor in social change, right? So you'd see speeches, and then you see engagement with art through song, right? Through, these different interventions. You see filmmaking, you see photography. The poets at that time were powerfully important.
Hughes and
Exactly. Nick Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, Hakeem Adabuti, Leroy Jones. I mean, all of these folks, right, are operating at a level, a cultural level, to begin to narrate and change hearts and minds. You see Belafonte and his ilk getting involved. You begin to see movies that are starting to sort of grapple with race and the tensions.
Like Lilies of the Field.
You see novels. So all of the arts begin to blossom with new narratives or old ones, right, that are cast in a particular way, and it's every of these gateways is a way into changing the way people are thinking about what is happening to other humans. Yeah. That's just one example. So years ago, I was able to participate in the first Yari Yari Black Women in the Futures conference, which was at NYU. Jane Cortez, the poet, had this idea, and then this incredible just collection of Black women writers from all over the globe were there. It came, and there was one woman from Africa. I think I'm not sure, I don't think she was Ghanaian, so I'm getting confused. I don't want to name her.
Yeah.
But she said something that has always struck me. And Baldwin also said something that has always struck me. She said that for many years, she hesitated calling herself a writer because in her country, to be a writer was a thing of great power and was quite dangerous.
Yeah, right.
Because the power of the word and of art to change minds is never underestimated by those who want to keep power for themselves. It is never underestimated. It is almost always underestimated by those who are not that interested in achieving and claiming power. So that was one thing that really struck me, because in her country, to be a writer, you could be exiled.
Right, exactly. I just think of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, just tortured, exiled, can't go home.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah, and yet all those it's hard to imagine the post-colonial environment without those voices. They're central to them, even though they can never go home. They can never go back to where they can to where people speak their native tongue.
Well, and if we think about the Vietnam War and all the action against that, I mean, the role that the musicians played in sort of narrating and defining what was going on is powerfully important. James Baldwin wrote at some point, or maybe he said it. He might have said it and wrote it, that he understood himself to be a witness as a writer, to write it all down.
Yeah.
And that has been really an important, a sort of defining moment for me as both a artist and a leader, to think about what is the role of the artist in engaging society. And I don't think it is imperative that every artist engage society in the way that I have tried to through my work. And in fact, I would hope not. I think diversity is important broadly, just as a fact. But I think that there is a reason, for instance, that this administration has focused on cultural institutions.
Right. Yeah.
There's a reason for that. There's a reason, and I haven't checked to see, but the reporting is that the Naval Academy, for instance, that Mein Kampf was kept, but I know why James Bird Sings was not. There's a reason for that.
Right. Yeah, that's why the artists are so important. They're so important for protecting the dignity of the human spirit.
I said to a group of seniors that I had over to the house maybe a month ago, these young people are graduating into a world that is in turmoil.
Yeah.
And they're frightened, if I'm honest. Not all of them, but there was fear. I both thanked them for their courage, and said to them that they are more important now than ever. That the vision that they have for the future, for how humans can and should engage with one another, is essential. And that their ability to narrate that, to inspire, to enable, is what we need now more than ever. So this is not a time to retract.
Yeah.
It's a time to step in, if that is your inclination.
Yeah, and Crystal, I feel that exact way about you. I mean, it just gives me so much hope for the future that people like you are, working with young people, working with faculties in important places in our cultural institutions. It's been a huge blessing. The bells rang, so I know that an hour passed, but I could have spent the whole afternoon just hearing your stories and just learning more about what you're up to. So thank you so much for joining us. It's
been fun talking to you.
To be together, yeah.
Thank you for the questions, Malcolm.
Sure thing.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. It's been nice to sort of be with you.
I know, completely. And like I said, we very much might have you in person one day. That'd be a lot of fun, too.
That would be great.
And then, so here's my final announcements. Please join me next Wednesday online when my guest will be Gary Dorian, author and professor of social ethics at Union Theological Seminary and professor of religion at Columbia University. We'll be talking about his newest book, Over from Union Road, My Christian Left Intellectual Life, a rich memoir of his unusual journey. But we're so glad for you, Crystal, and we wish you all the best as you navigate these difficult waters.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Malcolm, thanks for this work that you're doing. Very important, these conversations. Take good care.
I will. Take care.
Bye.